Welcome to Fundamentals of People Management, Module 14. I'm Dr. Lon Schiffbauer, and today we are talking about managing stakeholders. As a people manager, one of your most important jobs is to anticipate and mitigate for potential obstacles that your employees may run into when doing their jobs. After all, it's a big organization, and oftentimes folks are working at cross purposes or stepping on each other's toes or messing around in sandboxes where they shouldn't. As a people manager, your job is to anticipate these eventualities and kind of smooth things over before they become a problem. Remember, and I say this a lot, but your success is tied to the team's success. And if your team fails because you fail to recognize potential obstacles and to mitigate for these, well then, yeah, you didn't do your team any favors, and you certainly didn't do your career any favors. So it's in your best interest to think about this stuff. And that's where stakeholder management comes into play. Trust me when I say, there are few things as important as really learning how to manage stakeholders when it comes to ensuring the success of your team. So what do I mean by stakeholders? Well, a stakeholder is anyone with a vested interest in the outcome of whatever you're working on. So, in other words, whatever you accomplish, whatever your team does, this outcome will affect the stakeholders' own work, their own departments, and their own objectives. So they have a keen interest in whatever you're working on. And by the way, not all stakeholders want you to succeed. Some might actually want you to fail. We're going to talk more about this in a moment. But when I say that a stakeholder has a vested interest in the outcome of your project and what your team is working on, sometimes that vested interest is tied to your failure. I'm telling you, this stuff is important to think about. Okay, so those are stakeholders, right? And no matter what your team is working on, you have stakeholders of various sorts. We're going to talk about that. And furthermore, no matter what your team is working on, you need stakeholder support. So it's worth thinking about this early on. And when I say think about this early on, I mean in the planning stages. There are a few things you want to do in the planning stages in order to ensure stakeholder support later on down the road. Okay, so what's the first thing you need to do? You need to categorize your stakeholders along what is called the RACI model. RACI stands for responsible, accountable, support, consult, and inform. Each one of your stakeholders will fall more or less in one of these categories. So let's go through these. Responsible are the people who are actually doing the work, those who are hands-on working on whatever project your team has been assigned. So this means that quite often the responsible people are your direct reports, those who report to you through your team. However, you may also have other employees on loan to you from other departments to work on this project. They would be part of the responsible category as well. Next, we have accountable. These are the folks, the stakeholders, who are actually accountable for the outcome of the project. So these are the folks who are going to sign off on it at the end of the day and say, yes, this is complete, execute, launch, all that good stuff. The go, no-go decision. This is the accountable group. Now, as the people manager or as, say, the project lead, because your team is working on this project, you may very well be under the accountable group. However, there will be other managers or perhaps your supervisors and your leadership, other folks in your leadership who have a vested interest in the outcome of this project. They would be in the accountable category as well. Then we have support. This is the support you need from other departments on more or less a regular basis. So we're talking about perhaps IT support or HR or finance, legal, folks who are kind of involved in every project that an organization might pursue. Now, you might say, well, this is kind of baked in. It's their job to provide this sort of support. Well, yes and no. After all, they have their own objectives, they have their own projects, they have their own priorities. And so it may be difficult to get their support and have them focus on you and your team when they're kind of busy with all this other stuff over here. So you need to bear that in mind. Then we have consult. These are folks with expertise that can actually really help you. They've been around this block before. This is their wheelhouse. And so you want their help and guidance and insight to be successful. Finally, we have inform. These are folks who don't really have a whole lot of vested interest in the outcome, right? They're kind of low-level stakeholders. But you still kind of need to keep them informed for whatever reason. Maybe it's political or what have you. Now, in these cases, these folks don't really have a whole lot of influence on the project, and so it may be tempting to just kind of ignore them, but you don't want to do this because these folks, if they feel like they've been sidelined, well, they can raise a fuss, and you don't want that to happen. Okay, so we've taken all of our stakeholders and we have categorized them along the RACI model. Fantastic. The next thing we need to do is divide these folks into two camps, either supporters or opponents. Now, these terms are pretty self-explanatory. Supporters are your champions, the people who have your back, they're giving you air cover, all the terms we love to use in business. They want you to succeed and they're willing to help you do this. On the other hand, we've got opponents. These are folks who are withholding of their support. They may even actively work against you as you try to accomplish whatever it is your team is trying to accomplish. Sometimes in business, we refer to these people as the Darth Vaders. They are actively working against us in many cases, and it's infuriating. But we're going to talk about how to mitigate this. Okay, so we've got everybody lined up in the RACI model, and then we've identified them as either supporters or opponents. Now what we want to do is basically set up a matrix that runs along two axes. The first one is power. How much power or influence do they wield in the organization? I mean, somebody might complain and so on and so forth, but does anybody really listen to them? So how much influence do they have? The next axis that we look at is interest. Interest in the project. To what degree does the outcome of the project influence the person or affect the person? So by looking at these two axes, we can kind of put together a stakeholder management plan to figure out how to keep these folks informed and on our side. So for example, if someone's power, the degree to which they have a say on a project, is low, and the degree to which the project affects them is low as well, then you'll simply want to monitor these stakeholders, just to make sure they don't make any waves. On the other hand, if someone's power is high, as is the extent to which the project affects them, well then you better manage these folks closely and keep them happy. Now, if someone's power is high but their interest is low, then you'll want to keep these folks satisfied and meet any needs they may have. They may not have the same amount of skin in the game as those with high interest, but they have power and influence, so you want to keep them on your side. Conversely, if someone is profoundly affected by the outcome of a project but wields little power or influence over your project, then you'll simply want to keep them informed through frequent and transparent project updates. They may not have the power to make your life difficult, but you need to be considerate of the degree to which you're affecting how they do their jobs. That, and they may very well have the ear of somebody who does in fact have power. And if they kind of seduce these people over to their side, well, now you've got a problem. So you can't ignore low-power people. Okay, so you've got all your stakeholders all figured out and so forth. But now, we ought to pause and ask ourselves, why wouldn't somebody support your project? Why wouldn't they support your team? After all, you all work for the same organization, the same company, whatever. And so why wouldn't they be eager to see your team succeed? It should be obvious, right? Yeah, if only. There are a lot of reasons why stakeholders may withhold their support. Let me go over just a few of these. First, they may feel that what your team is working on has a negative impact on what they are working on. After all, they have their own goals and objectives and priorities, and if they feel like your team is working counter to these, they're certainly not going to give their support. Besides, as you know from our previous module talking about change management, a lot of changes may introduce thrash into the system. Will your project and what your team is working on increase the stakeholders' responsibility or their workload, or will it diminish their influence and position in the organization? If the answer to any of these things are yes, then you need to give this careful consideration when trying to win them over to your side. Next, if you don't have clarity around what it is you're trying to accomplish, then you certainly can't expect a stakeholder to get behind you. After all, what are they agreeing to? And related to this, if you don't have clarity around what you're working on, you may not therefore have clarity around what you are asking for from the stakeholder. You're asking for their support, maybe their help, maybe some of their people, maybe some of their expertise, all the things we talked about. And yet, if you're not clear around what you're asking for, well, then what are they going to do? What are you looking for? Another reason some stakeholders may be slow to lend their support is they may perceive that what you're working on kind of goes against previously agreed upon objectives. Maybe each year you do annual strategic objectives as an organization, so you set those as your North Star. And yet maybe they say, well, the project you're working on does not support these objectives, or maybe even goes against it. In which case, no, I'm not going to support it. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to try to kill your project. And then some of your stakeholders may even think that what you're working on, what your team is trying to accomplish, isn't even all that necessary. It's just busy work. I mean, speaking from my own experience, I can't tell you how many times I've seen leadership get all excited about a new tool or a new process, and we want to implement this, and it's going to be all amazing and fantastic. And yet we on the receiving end are like, this isn't all that great and fantastic. It, in fact, adds to our workload. It doesn't make things any better. In fact, maybe it makes things worse. And yet they're looking to us for support. Now, once again, this kind of goes back to the previous module on change management, but stakeholders are all about change management. They are an integral part of that process. That's why we put these two modules together. Finally, some of your stakeholders might believe that, yeah, okay, it's a great project that your team is doing, but the timing is all wrong. We can't support this right now. Now, this sort of makes some sense when you remember that your stakeholders represent different departments, and they all have their own projects and goals and objectives and priorities and their teams that they're working with and so forth. They're already busy as all get out. And so when you come looking for support, they may not have the bandwidth, they may not have the time, they may not have the energy to give you the support you need at this time. Okay, so these are just a few of the reasons that your stakeholders may be slow in lending support to your team's project. But then that begs the question, how do we win that support? What can we do to move them from passive or even opponent to supporter? Well, the first thing we can do, and frankly, I think this is probably the most important thing you can do, is connect the objective of your project to objectives that they have. So, as a general rule, people are far more interested in solving their own problems than they are in solving your problems. So, if you can demonstrate that your solution is going to help them achieve their solution, well, now you've got a supporter. Next, bring good, strong, solid data to support your case. Now, anyone can say, oh, I think it's a great idea, it's going to be marvelous, it's going to be wonderful. But unless they can demonstrate this through data, their case won't really hold too much water. Now, that said, you also want to express the outcome in emotional terms. Help the stakeholder envision the outcome and the benefits that they will derive by virtue of this outcome in ways that have emotional meaning to them. Imagine what would the world be like, what would the organization be like anyway, if we had this, and this in place. What would it mean to your goals? What would it mean to your people? What would it mean to everyone if we were able to accomplish this? By expressing the outcome in these sort of emotional terms, it ties people's hearts as well as mind through the data to the project. Next, you want to be really clear about what you're asking for. What level of engagement are you requesting from the stakeholders and their people and so on and so forth? What sort of work will they need to provide? What kind of air support will they need to provide? What kind of political clout and so forth are you hoping to leverage? The more clear you are about what you're asking for, the easier it will be for them to say yes. Next, provide a map, one which really shows how you're going to move from the current state to the end state and all the stages and milestones in between. This way, folks kind of know where they are, what's happening, and what they can expect next, and how soon they are going to benefit from the outcome that you've promised. Now, along the lines of this map, you want to provide frequent updates. Progress against schedule is what we call it. This way, folks know where they are. It's kind of like having that GPS, and you can kind of see how far along you are. It's easier to deal with a long trip and lots of support needed if they can see that you're making progress and are pointed in the right direction. This is what the frequent communications can help do for you. Finally, at the end of all this, acknowledge their contributions and the positive impact that they had on the success of the project. You could not have done this without them, so you want to make sure that they really feel this. Furthermore, you're going to need their support in the future on other projects. You and your team are going to rely on these folks very often. So you really want to make sure that you thank them for their support so that when you come around hat in hand again in the future, they're going to be more willing to kind of toss a few bucks in there. And there you go. You now have a good basic understanding of what it means to manage stakeholders on behalf of your team. Now, of course, this assumes that you do the things that we just discussed. In fact, the entire course that you've enjoyed, I hope you've enjoyed thus far, all really depends on you taking action against the things that we spoke about. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next and final module. Actual steps that you can take to increase your skill set as a people manager. It's not enough to just watch these videos and go, yeah, I got to think about that. You need to actually put this new knowledge to action, and I'm going to help you do that. All right? So, hey, thanks a lot for joining today, and until we talk again, have a fantastic day.